Gloria and her 3 children have been hiding out at a migrant shelter after they were kidnapped and extorted by Mexican federal police. They had traveled over 2,000 miles from El Salvador to get to the U.S. border. The plan? To seek asylum in the U.S. But a controversial Trump administration policy that is being challenged in the courts is forcing her to wait in Mexico instead of the U.S. for her asylum hearings, even though she told us she is in danger because of what happened to her in Ciudad Juárez.
No, pues yo me sentí fatal y yo dije, no puede ser, yo voy a volver a vivir lo mismo ahí. Dije yo, no quiero, decía yo lloraba. Yo lloraba y mis hijos me decían, mami, ¿qué pasa? Y yo les dije, miren, hijos, vamos para México otra vez.
Now the Trump administration has shut the border completely to all non-essential travel because of the coronavirus pandemic. Gloria and an estimated 60,000 people, mostly from Central America, are now indefinitely stuck on the Mexican side of the border with limited access to food, shelter, or American lawyers, who are their best chance at being granted the right to make it to the United States.
Unfortunately, the US government has really used the COVID-19 pandemic as a weapon against migrants. We're seeing it in the detention centers, but we're also seeing it across the border, where the government continues to refuse to allow in vulnerable populations such as Gloria or other individuals who are afraid for their life to remain in Mexico.
A few months before the recent health crisis, we traveled to the southern border to see how Trump's Migrant Protections Protocol, or MPP policy, was already keeping out migrants who say they face extreme danger on the Mexico side of the border, rather than letting them into the U.S. to wait for their asylum hearings, as had been done previously.
The reality is the biggest, highest, most effective wall doesn't have to be made of concrete. It's really in the laws that we have. It's the way that we've designed our asylum process to effectively shut off any lawful migration into this country.
Nicolas Palazzo travels back and forth from El Paso to Juárez nearly every day. He's a lawyer who works along the border for Las Americas, an immigrant advocacy group. Today, he's taking us to the Pan de Vida shelter in Ciudad Juárez. Gloria is staying here while her family figures out what's next. To protect her, we changed her name and will not reveal her identity on camera. The family originally left El Salvador in July 2019 to flee gang violence. They took all their life savings, $3,000, and started heading north to the U.S.
Fue muy duro porque a veces comíamos, a veces no comíamos, y así veníamos preguntando. Y como yo traía mi teléfono, ahí yo le había puesto el GPS para que más o menos me ubicara.
But when they arrived in Juárez, they were kidnapped by Mexican police officers who had offered to guide them to the border. Her 3 children, ages 13, 8, and 4, were locked in a room and threatened.
No me dejaban que los mirara hasta la noche. Me los llevaron ya en noche y yo les preguntaba a mis niños por qué lloraban, porque ellos nos estaban diciéndome de que ya nunca la íbamos a ver a usted, porque la podían matar o que sabíamos a usted y a mi papá.
The family was set free only after Gloria's mother, who lives in Maryland, paid $4,500 in ransom to 5 different bank accounts. She shows us copies of photos and text messages between the kidnappers and her mother. Along the US-Mexico border, human rights groups have tracked more than 800 violent attacks on people seeking asylum over the past year, including cases of murder, rape, and abduction. When Gloria's kidnappers released her, she came to the shelter. She did have one stroke of luck. They connected her with an American lawyer, Nicolas Palazzo.
There are more than 16,000 individuals in Juarez seeking representation. I can count on one hand the amount of attorneys who are representing individuals on a pro bono basis, meaning free of charge.
The 35-year-old Harvard law graduate is working on Gloria's case.
I travel to Mexico about 2 or 3 times a week to meet with clients of mine or even to screen individuals who I'm considering for representation. Our office is located about a 30-second walk from the main port of entry, the Paso del Norte Bridge between Juarez and El Paso.
The office is right by the port of entry for the safety of the attorneys. But still, meeting with clients is not easy. Nicholas ends up spending a lot of his time going back and forth across this bustling bridge.
Even something as simple as going into Mexico, getting a paper signed, and then coming back into the United States to file it in court can take all day.
For lawyers, a bigger challenge than logistics is the risk they take every time they go to work in Mexico. Immigration attorney Taylor Levy has been doing that for 10 years.
There's a lot of cartel scouts who hang out on the bridges, who approach us sometimes, speak to us, and it makes a lot of the attorneys worried for our safety.
A place like Ciudad Juarez is the 5th most dangerous city in the world in terms of homicides per capita. So when you ask what's the situation at the border, it's deadly.
Before the Trump administration's MPP policy, which went into effect last year, asylum seekers would present themselves to Border Patrol agents who would take them into custody. They were processed and allowed to remain on U.S. soil while waiting for asylum. Data shows 90% of migrants waiting in the U.S. showed up for court dates. But now, stuck in Mexico, with little access to legal representation, only about half the migrants are making it to their hearings.
La mayoría de los migrantes se descubrieron que era como un juego, como una burla, como una violación a su dignidad, a sus ilusiones o vaya, a sus argumentos de asilo político.
Father Calvillo runs Casa del Migrante, another shelter in Ciudad Juarez where we met migrants from Brazil like 38-year-old Valmir Elias Nanes and his son.
Se pedir asilo a país, isso não é crime. Trataram nós como se fôssemos terroristas.
Brazilians were once exempt from being forced to wait in Mexico because they don't speak Spanish, but the policy changed in January. The language barrier makes it harder for them to find an attorney.
To the best of my knowledge, there's basically no attorneys in this area who speak Portuguese who are working on MPP cases. There's not paralegals particularly who speak Portuguese. It's very problematic.
We used an app to talk to Valmir.
Que todos que estão aqui têm sonho de América, de conhecer. Meu filho, principalmente, ele tem mais vontade do que eu. Ele tem 7 anos. Hoje ele está fazendo 8 anos de idade aqui no albergue. O sonho dele era conhecer Estados Unidos.
Valmir's son is not alone. Estimates show that nearly a third of those caught in the crosshairs are children traveling with their parents.
They're suffering just as greatly as all the children during family separation crisis, if not even more. We're seeing more and more parents making this horrific choice of sending their children across alone, and that's been really horrific to watch, and that is completely a forced separation that is being created by this administration.
Of the 60,000 migrants who have been sent back to Mexico under this policy, less than 1% have been granted U.S. asylum. That's why many migrants are choosing to go back home rather than wait in Mexico.
Today it was a group of around 10 people that asked to return to El Salvador. So they will be flying today and arriving at night to El Salvador.
Alex Rigol runs a United Nations program that helps migrants who want to return to their home country. The program, which is heavily funded by the U.S. State Department, has come under fire for sending migrants back to the dangerous conditions they fled in the first place. But Alex insists that each case is carefully reviewed.
People who we are returning is people that doesn't have fear of prosecution or a fear in their home countries.
There are no official estimates of how many migrants are turning back or if they're managing to make the journey safely.
We don't know how do they traveled, how were the conditions, if it were safe trips they made. So a lot of people is now paying coyotes or smugglers to travel back to their countries because now smugglers had seen the return trip or the travel back home as a new business to jump in.
Homeland Security has praised the policy, calling it a game changer, as border apprehensions have gone down every month since May 2019. Critics and people working inside the government say that MPP is part of a push to make claiming asylum in the US harder and harder. The latest measures to close off the border to vulnerable migrants during a pandemic is just another example, says Nicholas.
This is a cruel and inhumane policy that is deliberately using a time of crisis to build up an even stronger, more fortified wall against the thousands of migrants who are trying to come into this country.
Just like Gloria and her family, who fled gang violence in El Salvador and are still fighting for a future in the US. The family is getting ready to appeal for a third time to be removed from the Remain in Mexico policy.
Tengo que sacar fuerzas de donde no las tenga, porque como no puedo regresar a mi país, tengo que seguir luchando.
We followed the family until the moment their lawyer Nicholas handed them over to Border Patrol agents halfway across this bridge. It was a tense and silent walk. Just a few hours later, they were interviewed by asylum officers behind closed doors. Within 24 hours of crossing this bridge that connects Mexico to the United States, it was all over. Their request had been denied once again. No reason was given.
We are kind of hiding this whole problem in Mexico, claiming that it's a Mexican problem, but it's not. The true crisis is not people coming to the border, it's us sending people back under these horrific conditions with these false hopes.
No, pues yo lo que le diría al presidente es pues que se ponga la mano en el corazón y que no sea tan duro con los inmigrantes, porque no todo es buscar el sueño americano, porque más que todo uno viene luchando por sus hijos.